welcome to the next edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I'm your host, Jessica Vaughn, president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay. And today I have on County Commission candidate in District 2, Angela Birdsong. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for endorsing me.
Absolutely. We're very excited about flipping county commission, especially in 2018. So let's start a little bit. I like to try to introduce my guests and give people some context outside of politics about their background. So tell me where you grew up, what you went to school, what your interests are, and a little bit about Angela.
Okay. So I am a native New Yorker. Mm-hmm. My father was born on the island of Barbados, and my mother's side is from Guyana. Mm-hmm. So I'm 100% Caribbean, made in the USA. So I actually went to school in New York. My first degree is in communications.
So do you mean New York City or?
I went upstate New York.
Upstate New York, okay.
Yeah, it's like a college. Mm-hmm. Although I was born and raised in the city. Okay. In Corona, Queens. And I started off as a journalist. And then my parents actually retired. My father retired from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And then he came down to lovely Tampa, Florida. I started visiting him. And I fell in love with the area. Oh. So I moved down here with a son and who was only 3 months old.
Wow.
And my husband, and I got rid of the husband and I kept the son.
What year was that?
That was 1989.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I've actually lived in District 2 for 29 years. And then later on in life, in my 50s, I actually went back to school for funeral directing.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have a degree in as a funeral director as well.
I did not know that. Plus, going back to school in your 50s, I didn't even know you were in your 50s.
Okay.
All right, so you came to Florida in 1989, and now you're running for county commission. So tell me what motivated you to run and why you wanted to jump in this race.
Okay. I knew I wanted to run for office. I started taking classes with a group called Ruthless. And that was started by Alex Sink. And she is she's a former elected official because she was our chief financial officer for the state of Florida.
And then she ran for governor.
She ran for governor unsuccessfully. But now all she does is work with candidates. And it's her goal to have a female candidate in every race in the state of Florida. And I got the call from Ruthless because they identified this race for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the lady who was running Ruthless gave me a call, and I thought about it, and I said, okay, I will accept that challenge. Yep. And as I said, I lived in the community, raised my son there. Right. They knew of my work with the Black Caucus and the Democratic Party. So I said, let's go for it.
And so you jumped right into it. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about who you're running against, because it's we talked about it with our last guest, about how the county commission is playing musical chairs. So the person who was originally in this district is termed out. So a commissioner from another seat is now running in this district against you. Is that correct?
That is correct. And these are the things that can happen when people are not paying attention. Because some of our county commissioners have run unopposed, and most of them are flipping seats.
Right.
So in my case, I'm running against a guy named Ken Hagan, who's actually been on the board 16 years because he ran in District 2, the district I'm trying to win today.
That you will win.
That I will win. That's right. Which is currently held by Victor Chris, who is terming out.
And then they're switching are they exactly switching?
They're exactly switching.
Right.
That's right. So what they're doing is they're going against the spirit of the law. Because when they instituted term limits, they thought the people would run for two 4-year terms, a total of 8 years, and they would go away.
Sure.
However, Ken Hagan ran for 2 terms in District 2, which is a single-member district. He termed out. He then ran again for a county-wide seat.
Right.
And won 2 terms, termed out again, and now he is running for District 2. So that he can do another 8 years.
So tell me, for those who don't know, who might live in this district, it's my district. Tell me first a little bit about the district. Where does it run and where does it cover for our listeners?
Okay, so geographically, it starts north of Linebaugh. Okay. So that includes the communities of Carrollwood, Northdale, Lute, Citrus Park, Odessa, up to the county line.
Okay.
It goes east into New Tampa, Temple Terrace, Mango, Northern Sassa.
Oh, my goodness.
And it has a little bit of Valrico and Brandon up until Highway 60.
Wow.
So if you're south of 60, you're not in my district.
Huh.
But it's quite large, even though it's not countywide.
Yeah, it is large. And what does the constituency look like? Is it more heavily populated by Republicans, Democrats? What does it look like as far as voters?
Well, believe it or not, it is 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, and 1/3 NPAs.
Wow.
That's how many independents we're getting now.
My goodness.
Yes. So a lot of people think, they look at Carrollwood, they look at Odessa and Luce, and they think, oh, well, that's my predominantly Republican district, but it is not. It includes Temple Terrace, which has a large Muslim community. It includes New Tampa, which has an influential Indian community.
Right. I've seen you doing a lot of work with that community as well.
Yes. So it's more diverse than it seems.
Okay. So what about Ken Hagan? What has he done on the board? We talked about it with Kimberly Overman a little bit. For people who don't know about our county commission, it's been a majority of Republican, she said, for the last 20 years, as far as who's dominated the board. And what do you know about Ken Hagan and what he's voted for and what he's done on the board since he's been there for 16 years?
Well, I'm trying to take out the big dog. Because he has been a force on the board. Of course, he's the baseball guy.
Oh, okay.
He has spearheaded the whole idea of having the Rays come over from St. Pete over to Tampa. Now, I have come out not against baseball.
Sure.
Because people don't mind baseball. It's just they do not want taxpayer $1 billion, almost $1 billion.
Wow. And that's to put it in Ybor, right? Is that what they wanted to do?
Put it in Ybor City. So I've made a little video, which you can see on my website, talking about how I feel about the stadium and also affordable housing.
Right. I remember that's at the front of your platform.
And transportation. And those are the things that we've been having a very hard time getting past the board.
Right.
Number one, when it comes to affordable housing, most of the county commissioners with an R next to their name are taking money from developers.
Oh, what a surprise. Go on. You wouldn't say that.
Which I think should be against the law.
I agree. I think it should be too. So you would think just naturally conflict of interest
That is a conflict of interest. How can you make a decision for the community that you serve when your pockets are being padded by developers?
And when you look at the contributions from some of these candidates that have been in office for so long, it's blatant. It's just real estate. Developer, just private entity, real estate developer, and there's so few private donations.
Attorneys,
yes,
are involved. I mean, the corruption runs deep and wide. And of course, the longer you're on the board, the more corrupt they get.
Right.
But Todd Marks, who isn't even on the board, has already started taking money from developers. The one that's trying to develop a 300-unit complex in Citrus Park.
Wow.
And they're talking about moving part of the Upper Tampa Bay Trail.
Oh yeah, I've seen that come before. That we defeated that, but narrowly, right?
Yeah, but it's still going forward. It's not gone.
So how would you, let's say, once elected, if somehow we didn't take back the commission and we were the minority, but you were elected, how would we address the problem of our politicians, specifically on the county commission, selling out our natural resources and our city and our infrastructure to developers at the cost of voters? How do we address issues like that?
Well, the thing is, if we don't have the votes, the only thing we have is our voice. And you can shine light on darkness. So the good thing about Pat Kemp being on the board, she does alert us
Yeah, she does.
If she feels that our presence will help. And it does help if we get the press involved.
Right.
And we make a big stink about things. It actually does help.
So shining the light is something that I've heard seems like a common theme is just alerting people and educating people about what's happening, because a lot of these meetings are very intensive. They happen where people are at work. They're not televised.
They are televised, though.
They are.
They are. Yes,
Okay.
they are. They're usually played on Sundays.
Oh, okay. But they're not live televised.
But they're not live. No.
Okay. So they're recorded and you can go back and see them. But a lot of people, they don't have time necessarily. They're not keeping up. So it sounds like getting people educated is key. So tell me a little bit about your platform. So we've talked about affordable housing. What else do you feel is at the front of your platform when you're thinking about what the voters in Hillsborough County really need as far as our county is concerned?
Okay, so the main issues besides baseball, because people really are anti-taxpayer dollars going towards that stadium.
Right.
The seat flipping is a big issue.
Yeah.
People really dislike that a lot.
Sure.
And then knowing that their county commission is actually in the pocket of developers.
Right. After
that is jobs.
Okay.
People want paying jobs,
right.
Quality jobs. And the only way we're going to do that is we have to have good schools and we have to have viable means of public transportation.
So infrastructure.
So
building real infrastructure, not just developer-led.
We need good old urban planning.
So that we can attract companies that would provide good jobs for us.
Public transportation is an economic driver.
Right.
So when companies look at an area, they're going to say, how long is it going to take for my employees to get to work? If they have school-age children, are the schools good enough for children to learn and prosper? So and then housing.
Right.
Is the housing affordable?
Sure.
And when you have developers who think that a $300,000 house is affordable, and they're building units where $1,000 to $1,500 is what a one bedroom is going for.
Yeah, I was going to say $300,000 is cheap these days for new houses that they're building. They're astronomical.
And you're thinking about even your firefighters, your police officers, your teachers, your workforce can't afford to live.
Right.
Much less low income housing. So we're going to really have to get some commissioners who are going to put these developers' feet to the fire and say, hey, look, you need to be doing mixed use developments where you have enough apartments for working people as well as people who are upper income.
Right.
But, when you have commissioners who are being ruled by developers,
right.
They don't get impact fees.
Yes, we've talked
Somehow
about that.
Pinellas County gets theirs.
Right, that's
Pasco
what I've heard.
gets theirs. But they'll tell you, well, even though I'm taking money from developers, it doesn't cloud my judgment. It hasn't made a difference on any of my votes.
Right. And then you look at the votes.
And
they're all geared towards the developers.
Fees.
Right.
Yes.
So I know we're talking about schools, and that's on a lot of people's minds. There's this whole charter school movement. And I know as a lot of county commissioners, you don't have direct access over the schools. That's the school board. But if we're talking about the whole picture and we're talking about infrastructure, where do you see, when we're talking about good public education, where do you see the roles of charter school fitting in that? Because even though county commission doesn't monitor our budget, they still approve land use for charter schools or for schools to develop. So
true, nothing can be developed without coming to the county commission.
So tell me what you see when you talk about good schools and public education, how you see charter schools fitting into that.
Well, the thing is, every child deserves an excellent outcome, regardless of their zip code, regardless of what school they're able to go to.
Right.
And charter schools started out as a great idea.
They did.
But unfortunately, number one, greed has gotten into it.
Right.
And also, they don't have the same standards that public schools
right.
live up to.
Sure.
So I've heard of people saying, well, I sent my child to a charter school and they got a great outcome. And then I had some parents say, I sent my child to one and they got a very bad
right.
outcome.
Right.
So the thing is, right now, we really have to worry about every public school being a great place for a kid to be.
Right.
Every public school having air conditioning, being functioning buildings.
Right.
First, that has to be our first priority. We cannot siphon money off of our public school system to go into a private school system where the teachers aren't even being paid. They don't have pensions. They don't have benefits.
I mean, they call them benefits. They have some health benefits, but they're so poor that most people I know have to put their own children on Sunshine Health or some sort of public health.
Oh, wow.
Health for their children because they can't afford it on a teacher's salary, and the medical is so bad. So they have what you would call benefits, but they're really not. But yeah, you're on the right track. Absolutely. We need to start valuing our teachers and making sure our schools and our students have the resources that they need. So I want to switch gears just a little bit because, we've talked about, mentioned that, I believe you're the only, county commission, candidate who's a person of color.
True. I am African American.
And one of the issues that we had with the county commission, which really gave me a feel for who they were as commissioners, obviously, was the monument issue where, we had requested, so many of us, for them to remove the Confederate monument. And, I think they first agreed and then they reneged and then they agreed only if the public raised the funds to have the monument move themselves. And we were, lucky enough that somebody spearheaded that and it caught fire and we were able to raise the money and have the monument removed. But to me, that was a very good indication of where a lot of the commissioners, especially the ones who voted against that, where, they kind of stood as far as civil rights. To me, that was a clear indication of civil rights. So tell me a little bit as a person of color and more as a woman of color running for county commission, what your experience has been, what you felt as far as the monument and what it would mean to have a woman of color on the board and what direction you think that would take us in.
Well, the thing about the monument issue, it was one of the first times that the average person in Hillsborough County said, hey, that's my county commission.
Right.
And they want to keep a bastion of slavery in the front of the halls of justice.
Right.
And people really started to look at that and say, wait a minute, there's 4 county commissioners who are voting in lockstep. And those guys started being known as the Monument 4.
Well, one of them is a woman, right?
Right. One of them, yeah.
Sandy Merman.
Sandy Merman. The guy I'm running against, Hagan. And
White.
We have White.
Stacey White.
Stacey White.
And then the one who's vacating the seat.
Victor Chris.
Okay, yeah.
So those 4 basically ended up with an X on their back. And people started to say, you know what? We really need to remove these guys. They all happen to be Republicans. And they learned the hard way that once you shine the light on darkness, the community came together and said, no, this is not acceptable.
Right.
So that's why we don't have that monument anymore.
Thank goodness.
Now, it would be a wonderful thing for an African American to be in a seat in the county commission that is not the, quote, black seat.
Right.
Okay?
Which is Les Miller right now.
I am not running for the black seat.
Right.
Les Miller is in that seat right now. It's in the heart of the county.
Right.
In District 3. Basically, the other seats are gerrymandered in such a way that an African American, it's very hard for them to win. But because of the climate of the nation, if you're a woman, all of a sudden, that's a good thing.
All of a sudden,
being an African American is a good thing.
Oh, that's
And
good.
I also represent the immigrant community.
True.
Because I'm a first generation immigrant on my father's side. So I've given my campaign a name. It's called We the People.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So I've gone around to a lot of different coalitions in the community because it's District 2 is really diverse.
It is, yeah.
And so and I've gone to Caribbean people and Indian people and African Americans. I'm part of the Black Caucus. Right. And they're telling me if I want to win this race, I have to bring out the Hispanic people and I have to bring out the Black people. And I said, great, I will take that challenge.
Well, it's a good time to be on ticket with Andrew Gillum and Sean Shaw then.
God must have had a plan all along. And we are so proud. I'm glad you brought him up because those are our Black Caucus candidates. We're so proud of them.
Right.
We happen to have the president of the Florida Black Caucus right here in Hillsborough County,
Lydia Hudson.
And so we are so proud of Andrew Gillum, Sean Shaw, and Angela Birdsong. And what I tell all of our Black constituents is, don't ask what the party can do for you. You are the heart and the soul of the party.
Right.
Black women are our foot soldiers. They have always been there for us. And the good news is we have more than enough people registered, so we just have to get our people out to the polls. And we can just do this. There's enough Black people and brown people in any race in Hillsborough County to flip that race.
So we've talked to some other candidates that have talked about the struggles of being an African American candidate, down to the decision of whether or not to put like your face on your signs or your lit, and how some have experienced a culture of being cliquish or people discouraging them from doing certain things because they are African American. Do you feel like you've felt that since you've run that race? Because it's something we like to talk about on this podcast, is if there's indiscrepancies or differences between how African American candidates feel that they're treated within the Democratic Party.
Well, I think that more often than not, candidates are all treated the same. And a lot of times it's not always a race, it's the numbers. They'll say, well, look how much money you've raised. You can't win. Look at your poll numbers. You can't win. Right. Okay. And all these things are slowly becoming old-fashioned because money doesn't vote.
Right.
And
to quote Andrew Gillum.
Okay. We just had a candidate, an East Indian candidate. He raised over $400,000.
Right.
Mr. Patel, and he lost his primary.
He did. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew Gillum was behind the polls and behind the money. He's at the top of the ticket right now. So I think it's going to take the party a little time to catch up because they throw these things at you like it's engraved in stone.
Well, I think it's the part of the party who are consultants that make money by profiting off the fact that if you're behind in the polls, let's get a robocall and use our company and it will only cost you $20,000 or here's how we can market it. So I think that the part of the party that we call the old guard that's hesitant to change and embrace this new kind of populist movement of people voting for candidates that represent them, the ones that are hesitant to change are the ones who have capitalized off it for so long through consulting services or who have established a small amount of power that they don't want to let go in. So I think as we talk to candidates, I like to try to distinguish for our listeners that there are different parts of the party, and that, unfortunately there's a part of the party who still won't kind of embrace the new progressive future of, supporting candidates with a strong message. Absolutely. And not the ones that have the biggest donor base or some of the things that you've mentioned. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But anyway, and I don't want to switch gears because I love talking about what we talked about, but I do want to cover just some issues so people get a feel for where you stand on your platform. So I pulled your application to the Progressive Caucus, which I do with a lot of the candidates that come on, and I just wanted to go over some of the issues that are near and dear to so many of our listeners' hearts. Now, tell me how you feel about the $15 an hour Fight for 15 movement and whether that's something that you see as a good thing, and to kind of coattail on that along with like workers' rights and unions in Florida and how you feel about, our working movement.
Okay. So I am for $15 an hour.
Okay, good.
And more.
Oh, okay.
Because what I really want to see everyone have a living wage,
right.
But we want to have more of our young people going into trades,
right.
Apprenticeships, and college degrees. Because how we're going to get the next generation out of poverty is to have them educated. And if they don't want a college degree, then they need to go for a trade.
Right.
Because we know that if a person isn't making enough income, it's usually because they don't have enough education. And one thing the county commission is over is Head Start.
Oh, okay.
And we found that the earlier you start the children off and get them on a good start, the better off they're going to be in life.
I did not know that. That's interesting. They're over Head Start.
They are over Head Start.
So if we're talking about trade workers doing more trade jobs, then that does talk about workers' rights, which Florida has a very poor history of supporting workers' rights. Nationally, we have a poor history recently, but Florida's always been a right to work state. So do you believe that unions are important to the history of just how our workers' rights have been, and do we need to continue to support unions, or where do you stand on unions?
Well, being a native New Yorker, I believe that the unions are the backbone of the American working class.
Oh, okay.
So my mother, believe it or not, is 93 years old. And she remembers what America used to be like before unions.
Really?
Yes. And we owe our 40-hour-a-day work week to unions.
Right.
My mother used to say, sometimes you go on the job, you don't know when you come off. We used to have child labor in this country.
Yeah. So I tell my son all the time when he complains about chores.
I mean, it was real.
Right. I know.
We had kids that didn't go to school because they had to work. They had to help support the family.
And unsafe working conditions on top of that.
That's right. So all of these things came about because of unions.
Right.
And when you see people going after the unions, they are going after the backbone of the middle class.
Right.
And what you're finding is less unions mean we have more poor people and more rich people.
Right.
They're hollowing out the middle.
Absolutely.
And the rich are getting richer and richer. And the only way we're going to stop this is by getting out and voting for Democrats.
Right.
In our and because Republicans, they tell you who they are and what they're for. And if you want to vote against your own interests, believe me, they will do what's best for them.
It's absolutely true. And we're talking about that when we're talking about voting in favor of developers instead of the working people. But unfortunately, it seems like they've co-opted that narrative. So we have to make sure that we educate people. And I like the narrative that you used about hollowing out the center, because when you do that, things collapse. When you take the middle substance out of any layer, things collapse. And I feel like we're at the beginning, we're on the edge of collapsing as a society, because we are tearing apart that middle class, and the discrepancy between the poor and the rich has become so extreme at this point.
And you know what I do for a living is I help people successfully age on to Medicare.
Oh, okay.
And I help people who are currently on Medicare or Medicaid. And what you see is there's the greatest generation in America where they actually had pensions and they're able to pay for long-term care. All of that is starting to erode and go away, where you're having people who are in very low fixed incomes. Yeah. They don't have pensions to depend on. They're not staying on the job for long periods of time.
Right.
So, we're just starting to see people coming through who are not prepared for old age.
And so on that note, how do you feel about our healthcare system, and where should we move as far as healthcare in America is concerned?
Well, I love Medicare. And guess what? It's democratic socialism. But it works.
So you think you'd support Medicare for all if that was an option? I would
support Medicare for all. And if we couldn't do that, at least bring it down to age 55, because people who are in their 50s are really getting hurt by private insurers. And if they have any illness at all, $1,000, $1,400 a month, easily done. I mean, these are the kind of premiums that I'm seeing.
Yeah. That's crazy. And I read today where Donald Trump had suspended the open enrollment for what they call Obamacare, but and to take the website down for maintenance and make sure less people get it. And I just don't understand why Republicans don't want their constituents to have health care.
I know. It's the number one issue in the United States.
And when I talk to most candidates, when they're out there knocking on the doors and I ask, what do most people are concerned about, universally, health care is because it affects everybody.
It does.
Regardless of who you are. So in that notion, let's talk about some more of the issues. So we're talking about healthcare. One thing I remember from reading your application to the Progressive Caucus was your stance on, I'm trying to get the right term because I usually say recreational marijuana, but I've been corrected. So I believe it's called adult use marijuana now. Candidates have made sure to make sure that we're using those terminologies. So one thing it looked like you felt passionate about, or that I saw a few times in your application, was the commitment to adult use marijuana and utilizing that. So tell me a little bit more about your stance on adult use marijuana or medical marijuana.
Okay, well, I'm 100% for medical marijuana and adult use marijuana. And one of the reasons I'm passionate about it is because there's a lot of people who have criminal records, due to drug use.
That's true.
And I think that it's overkill. It also leads to vote yes on Amendment 4.
Absolutely.
So we can get our felons' voting rights restored. I mean, really, when you attach a criminal record to people because of drug use, a lot of people, they do foolish things when they're young.
Sure.
And to have them pay for their whole life long over drug offenses.
Or any felony. We're one of the only states that implement that law in general. I mean, unless it's, something heinous or a brutal crime.
But I'm also for ban the box. You shouldn't have to tell people, if it's something you did, you paid your time, it's over, it's done.
Right.
And you want to, it leads to people being chronically unemployed.
So let's just give, for context for listeners, ban the box, meaning the box where you have to check if you've been a felon on your job application and your history that disqualifies you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is a little bit of a jump. One of the things that I've seen come across county commission recently, and I've been paying attention, is a lot of development of our natural resources, because I feel like there's a push and people are worried there's going to be a change on a county commission. So developers that own conservations or wetlands or part of, the ocean want to push through developing those now. So I get a great feel for your stance on, civil rights and people's rights. What would you say is your stance on environment-related issues, especially if that's going to be coming across county commission more and more as people tend to develop?
Well, I am all for keeping our rural areas rural and developing in our urban service area. And I hear this so much in the Odessa, the Keystone area. They really, really want to keep those areas rural. And I'm 100% for that. Because a lot of them moved down from areas like New York City, Washington, Chicago. They specifically moved into these areas so that they could have that feel for nature, wildlife. And these developers haven't seen a plot of land that they don't love to develop.
Yeah.
And somehow we have got to put the skids on these guys, the brakes on them.
Right.
I was just out in District 2 in Lutz, and they are putting up a ton of rooftops right at Van Dyke Road and Dale Mabry. And I'm like, those roads are already congested.
Right.
Where are the people going to go? And it's very close to the area of the Keystone, Odessa area, and they are really, really concerned.
Yeah, they always are.
They always are. They're really.
That's what I hear a lot.
Hot.
And I don't blame them. They moved out there for a reason. Okay, so also, here are some things that I generally ask most candidates about, regardless of where they're running. What about women's rights to reproductive rights, women's rights to choose? Where is your stance on that?
Oh, I believe that women should healthcare should remain safe and legal.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And that's a straight answer on that. And then another thing I like to ask candidates about when they come on the show, just so I get a feel. And I know this one, I saw some things on your application that made me question, and I'd like to get a good feel for it. And it's a challenging subject. And I think you and I talked about it briefly on the phone when we were talking about your endorsement. But essentially, it's the separation between church and state. Because I know that religion is a huge factor in a lot of people's lives. But at the same time, we have so many different religions. Here you are talking about different communities that you go into, the Muslim community or, the Indian community, where a lot are Hindu. So how do we deal with, personal religion and the separation between church and state, and how important do you see that separation yourself?
Well, that's what our nation is founded on. Mm-hmm. I agree to the separation of church and state. What's making me a little sad right now, though, is that there's been people that have hijacked religion.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're making things like racism, bigotry, xenophobia, part of religion.
Right.
And these things are not part of religion. And I'm actually proud to be a Christian, proud to be a God-fearing person. And I'm very, very happy about the Nehemiah Action Project, where 125 churches have come together and said, hey, we're God-fearing people, and we should be able to help with things like affordable housing, social justice, and elder care. So I'm hoping that young people will not be turned off by religion and being God-fearing.
So let me ask you this. In a project like that, and this is something that I've talked to specifically the African-American candidates about, because there's a very strong, and I love the strong faith that has come out of a lot of the African American communities. And a lot of times we've talked about this, the church has been the refuge in so many communities, providing so much assistance where our society has failed these communities with infrastructure and support. But how do you allow these groups or churches to come in and offer support without the piece of maybe pushing the religion or trying to convert people? Because I think that is something that I wrestle with myself, is once you allow churches to come in and supplement what our government or what our society has been doing, then there comes these overtones of trying to push a certain religion or convert people, and that's where I worry. So tell me how you see the balance between that working.
Well, coming from New York City, where you had so many religions, races, together in one big melting pot.
Right.
We used to celebrate each other. And I don't know where that celebratory attitude kind of went away, where you say, hey, we have Chinese food, and let's all go down to Chinatown. And, we had Little Italy, and everybody was celebrated. And I wouldn't mind if in schools they had say, hey, well, let's have an international day. I remember when I was in junior high school, we had a great international day, and we had a talent show, and the Chinese people came in with these beautiful dances, and you learned so much about different cultures and heritages and religions.
Right.
A lot of times religions carry the heritage forward.
Right.
So I just wish there could be a way where we could all just celebrate each other.
So instead of allowing our differences to separate us, you feel more we should be inclusive with that. Okay. I like that answer. So moving forward, and I'm just kind of trying to go down a list here. So if it sounds like I'm jumping around, tell me a little bit about some of the biggest challenges you've had so far in your campaign and some of the biggest successes.
Okay, so money is a challenge.
Okay, money's a challenge.
Money's a challenge, and especially when you're running for the first time.
Right.
Because you have to, I don't have a big network of people with money.
Sure.
That is one thing that African American candidates do have a negative, a deficit on. I don't know a bunch of millionaires that I can run to. So I'm always constantly having to prove myself. You have to talk to the donors on the phone, and they don't know who you are. They don't know if you're going to win.
Right.
So that has been probably my biggest challenge. Believe it or not, one of the things I have enjoyed the most is canvassing.
Oh.
I have never canvassed. Even though I've helped other candidates,
right?
I always say, well, let me phone bank for you.
Sure.
Yeah,
it can be intimidating.
Yeah, let me go to some events with you, help you out, whatever. But canvassing is such a wonderful thing to do.
It's a really good way to get to know people.
Number one, we only knock on Democratic doors.
Right.
So these are our people.
Sure.
And I knock on the door and I say, it's the Democratic Party. And if they come to the door, I just say, hey, is there any Democrats in here? and they get so excited, especially if they live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of Republicans.
Oh, okay, so right.
You come in there and you say, hey, give them a high five and say, hey, we're all Democrats. We're in this fight together. And so it's been very rewarding for me, canvassing.
Have you been invited in a lot? That's always the trap.
I get invited in.
There's somebody who's a little lonely. They want to talk to you. They invite you in. And before you know it, you're there for 20 minutes. So
I want to encourage anyone who has not canvassed, do it. You will love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great way to connect with people, I feel like. Yes. And some people who aren't interested, then just like anything else, you say thank you and you move on. And there are so many people who are receptive. I'm glad that you brought that up. So let's talk then about how people can help you. So we're talking about fundraising. How can people give you money? What's the best way to donate and the best way to get in touch with you to help with your campaign?
The best way is the way that's good for them. So if they're online people, it's angelabirdsong.com.
Okay.
If they want to do it by mail, let's see if I can remember my P.O. box.
Well, they can find it on the website as well, right?
Yes. And but AngelaBirdsong.com, I was lucky to get my name, so just AngelaBirdsong. Now, if they want to follow me on Facebook, it's Facebook.com/AngelaBirdsong4cc. So it's FORCC, and then hashtag AngelaBirdsong4cc on Instagram, and then @VoteBirdsong if you're a Twitter person.
Wow, you have more social media than I do. So you need you need donations. Sounds like you're doing canvassing. If there are a few people who love to canvass,
yes.
Are you hosting some events coming up that people can get involved with? Knocking doors?
I'm doing a lot of political forums.
Oh, okay.
So the next political forum I'm going to do, I believe, is the Muslim forum at the mosque.
This Saturday, is that right?
I believe it's this Saturday.
The Democratic Progressive Caucus will be there.
Okay, good.
That one looks like a big one too, right? I think they have 15 candidates have announced so far.
They said 20 candidates.
20 candidates.
So I didn't get a schedule yet.
Now, is that the New Tampa Mosque?
No, that's the one on Sly.
The one on Sly, okay. And what time is that going to be at?
I believe it starts at 2, if I remember correctly. Okay. But I did post it on my Facebook page.
So people can come to Facebook page. So if you want to help Angela, and you should, because politics right now, we have very little control at the national level, but what we have the most control over is local. Your election, let's talk about the election. Our listeners probably know, but if not, early voting or vote by mail has started, right?
It has started.
And
we have a big Democratic Party vote by mail initiative.
Okay.
So we want everybody who possibly can vote by mail. You can vote from the comfort of your living room. And there's a lot of amendments.
There are.
Not just 4. And we have 2 referendums, one for schools, the half-cent tax, and one for transportation.
And are you urging people to support both of those?
I am urging people to support them.
Okay.
So we really, really want people to vote by mail. If you just don't want to vote by mail, then please vote early.
Which runs October 22nd till November 4th. And I think there are 12 different libraries.
You know it too.
I know. Which people can find online at the Supervisor of Election in Hillsborough County. People can still request vote by mail ballots all the way till Halloween, October 31st.
They only need about 6 days to get that ballot out to you.
And of course, then there's Election Day, November 6th, Tuesday, 6th. Which everybody should participate in.
Election Day. I hope your vote is in.
I know. That's what we were talking about on the last episode, how scared I've always been to wait to the last day because anything could happen. I think our last candidate said she missed one because her plane was supposed to be back at 9 a.m. and it got delayed, and then she got in at 7:05 and it was the first election. So you never know. So please make sure you vote early. If you need any other information, you can find everything.
I will give my phone number.
Oh, okay.
813 476 4837.
4837.
I love hearing from people.
So you can call Angela. You can ask her questions. You can figure out how to get involved with her campaign. You can give her money because it sounds like your challenge is really getting donations. And for people who don't want a phone bank and don't want to canvass and say, how can I make this blue wave happen? How are we going to flip our county commission? You can go
just placing a sign.
Okay, so signs.
Yes. Yeah. And sign or business.
So can people get signs?
Home or business.
Can people get your signs up at the headquarters?
Yes, and the headquarters is at 13220 North 56th Street near Fletcher.
Wow.
Our new Democratic Party
Can't believe you have that memorized. That's impressive.
I love that place.
I love it too. I fought for it. I loved it so much. Okay, so people can go and they can pick up your signs. They can find out more information. And I'm excited. So I hope you're excited as well. This is our time. This is probably the most important election of our lifetime. That's what I feel like. We have some amazing candidates that have really educated themselves on the issues and aligned their platforms to make sure that we're supporting the people and the voters. I thank you so much for driving out here late at night. For those of you who don't know, it's very late at night and we're all tired. And we're recording this podcast. And I wish you so much luck on your race. I'll be out there
for all of the candidates.
Absolutely. I'll be out there on Election Day handing out slate cards and giving out information to voters. So thank you so much to all of our listeners. Thanks again for coming out and interviewing with us. Make sure that you get involved. Make sure that you vote. Make sure that you're letting your friends and neighbors know about the election and the midterms, and that you're supporting our Democratic candidates all the way down the ticket, making sure that you're voting yes on amendment number 3, 4, 9, and 13, no on the rest, that you're supporting those tax referendums, both number 2 and number 3, so that we can support our public transit and our education system, and that you are supporting Angela Birdsong for County Commission District 2. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you for all of our listeners. We hope you have a great night.